Empaths, it's your girl Key. One of our biggest problems, my empath crews, one of the reasons we often end up stuck, depressed, sad, going round in vicious circles, is we often have a problem with our reality and our fantasy. If that makes sense to you, listen up. Often we have a fantasy in our mind's eye of how situations should be, how we'd like them to be. But our reality and fantasy don't quite measure up. And often we're caught holding on. It's one of the ways we get stuck, my empaths, holding on to a fantasy of how situations should be. And this is one of the biggest reasons we get stuck, anxious, and depressed. And if that makes sense to you, then you need to listen to my 3 tips. It's your girl, Keely Taverner, psychotherapist who's passionate about helping empaths make sense out of tricky, difficult situations. Empaths, we need to be clear with ourselves. One of our biggest problems is we have fantasies about how relationships should be, situationships should be. We have a reality fantasy distortion. And the more you are hooked on fantasy on how things should be, and you are dissatisfied, annoyed with your reality, is the more likely you will develop common mental health problems. Now, you may have been in a situation, you know what, actually that's the first tip. The bigger your gap, the bigger the problem you have with your reality, because it doesn't measure up to your fantasy, is the more likely you'll develop common mental health problems. Now, for many of us, we need help to make sense of that. Like, what the hell's going on? Come see your girl Key, get on the program, let's talk. Let me help you understand your fantasy reality distortion. The more you are living in a fantasy of hoping and wishing situations were different, it's the more likely, as I said before, you're going to develop a whole raft of challenges and problems. Often for many of us, we don't like our reality. A relationship may have promised you something different. You placed all your hopes on that relationship to transform your life. So for example, if that relationship fails, now what about your dreams and fantasies? For many of us empaths, especially the ones who have fantasies and fairy tales about romantic relationships saving the day, the reality fantasy distortion is particularly problematic for you. You have to wake up and smell the coffee. I know fantasies are wonderful. They're a beautiful place to live. However, if your reality doesn't match up, or if you have disproportionate expectations of how people should be so they can fulfill your fantasy, my friend Houston, we have a problem here. The challenge for many of us, and your girl Key is not exempt. I preach this stuff, but I have to walk by my own teachings. And that's not necessarily easy, so I get it. You know, your girl Key has been there, going there, been there, is there, and keeps journeying through. Yeah, it's how we give the love back. I get it. The client will not go where the therapist has never been. I understand that. So the challenge we have is what is in the fantasy. And this is something that you need to understand. We need to work on developing your fantasy so we become clearer about what gifts may lay, what clues, what indications may be in the fantasy to help you disentangle yourself and at the same time empower yourself to consider what choices you may need to make should life not work out on your terms. So that's the second tip. In your fantasy, that you have often pinned onto other people, and so that they could be a vehicle for your own dreams and aspirations. Does this make sense to people? It makes sense in my head. Let me know if it makes sense. We have to work out if there are clues within the fantasy to help us make changes to our lives so that we can live much more fully. That promotes self-responsibility. That promotes getting outside of your comfort zone. And in my view, it is one of the ways that we turn disappointment into opportunity. It's one of the ways that, difficult things happen, relationships fail, some of our dreams don't come to fruition. However, even within that process, there are nuggets of gold to extract. And this is why it's so important to pay attention to the fantasy, visualize the fantasy, so we get clearer about the direction and the way forward. Lastly, you may well need companionship and support to help you do that. Ruminating on your own, going round in vicious cycles is not healthy for you. But if there's anything I know for the many, many people that I've supported over the years that I have been a psychotherapist, is our fantasy reality distortion is one of the main causes of our stress and depression. And if you have the courage to inspect that, to do the work, to get companionship for the journey, you never know. The adverse situation that you find yourself in, where your heart's broken, where you're disappointed and your dreams lay on the floor, may well be an unwelcomed opportunity for you to be brave and courageous and do things differently. This is one of the key symbols, the key ways, there you go, there's the key, to empower you to make changes to your life and to take responsibility for our dreams. One of the problems we have is we often hook our dreams onto other people. When the relationship fails, we're annoyed because our dreams die with that relationship. Well, I'm here to tell you the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes we don't want to take full responsibility for what we want for our lives. So therefore, we can go around blaming Jim, Bob, and Jane for all the things they didn't do to justify why our dreams don't manifest. Well, if you ever choose to work alongside your girl Key, we ain't got time for that. It's about encouraging you to be responsible, to take responsibility for the vision and the future that you want for yourself. Yes, I know for some of us, we hope to do that in a coupledom, or we hope to do it with Derek, Jim, or Jane, and that relationship may not have worked, such is life. But that doesn't mean that the dream or aspiration that we had has to die with that relationship. For some of us, and we may not like this empaths, we may have to start that journey alone. We may have to be brave and have courage and step outside of our comfort zone. Now, we know that's not easy, but being stuck and going around in circles ain't easy either. Sometimes we literally just have to choose. I hope this video is of benefit to you. Remember, the more you live in a fantasy and you avoid your reality, you will be stuck and your depression, anxiety will increase. If you need help disentangling from your fantasy or actually exploring your fantasy to see what golds, what nuggets of, what gems hide within there about your potential and the future that you want for yourself, and you need support, inbox your girl Key. Click below. Let's talk. Let's converse about finding a way forward. My ambition as ever, my empath crew, is to assist you to make your pain purposeful so you can heal, understand, and move on and live a much more fulfilling life. Now, don't you want that? I know I do. It's your girl, Keely Taverner, psychotherapist who's passionate about helping empaths get clarity about the situations they find themselves in. Do take care of you, because if you don't, who will?